This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. My name is Kate Jenkinson, and I am your host for this wonderful 8-part series, Neurodiversity in the Workplace, where, along with my guests, we explore the rapidly developing landscape that is neurodiversity in work. My guests are industry leaders, coaches, and business founders who share their passion, knowledge, and the real-life situations and scenarios from their own practical lived experience. Together, we examine the complexity of the workplace for those who experience the world differently. Whether you're a business owner, leader, coach, or trainer, these conversations highlight how you can make a difference to everyone's working world by looking at life through a neurodivergent lens. I am delighted to have Cheryl Winter of Cheryl Winter Coaching join me today. And Cheryl, we're going to talk about your experience of neurodiversity in the workplace. So welcome.
Thanks.
An interesting question I wanted to ask you, and an interesting answer I'm sure you're going to give me, is why is it important to you, neurodiversity in the workplace?
If I'm honest, when I first started doing this work, I had no idea that it was important at all.
Yeah.
And that was back in 2011 with the changes in the Equality Act, which then allowed people with what they class as hidden disabilities to receive support in the workplace. A new business was being formed, and you may recognise the name Genius Within, but it was a brand new baby business back then.
Oh, I like the idea of a baby business, just that phrase.
It was a baby business, Kate. And there was 3 directors and 6 freelance coaches. And it was like, we know you're great coaches. You're going to come and do some support. So it was like, okay, but I don't know anything about dyslexia, ADHD or autism. No idea. So they brought us on board and they were built. And it was trial and error then. The kind of stuff that's on the internet and that wasn't available there. It was training, learning about dyslexia, learning about ADHD. But one of my very first clients, and I can see his face now in my mind's eye. And I know you won't get that case, but I can. And he had changed careers because he'd been a delivery driver. But a delivery driver to like big stores like Selfridges and Harrods and things like that due to an accident. So now he's working in a funeral parlour, big changer.
Yeah.
And so all the admin was causing him an issue and his spelling and his reading was difficult. And so I said to him, just tell me about when you do work, when you've worked at your best. And literally he transformed in front of me.
Oh, that question.
His face changed, and it's like, that's easy, Cheryl. He's got his hands here, demonstrating to me when I'm driving through the London. I was never late. I was always on time. How did you get there? And he said, I'd look at a map once, and it was there in my head. And we explored it through coaching. And he realised that kind of on his steering wheel, he would almost have this map. I suppose we would say it was like a visual sat-nav in his head. Once we explored it, and there is a special technique in coaching to help you use your visual strategies for spelling. So I helped him to see a road that he knew. And he said, yeah, I can see the letters and I can spell it backwards as well. Great. So then I asked him to put maybe one of his child's names in there. And he said, yeah, I can see the letters and I can spell it backwards. And then we put a name in there. And I actually think the first name we put in there was the name of the client they'd been working with that morning. And it was a foreign name. And he amazed himself that just by imagining that he was back in his van and all those gorgeous, proud feelings that he had from there, he could spell. So anyway, the coaching continued. And at the end of the coaching, he said, I want to tell you that for the first time ever, I read a whole book to my daughter last night.
Oh, that's amazing.
That is the moment, Kate, that I realised that this stuff was important.
Yeah.
It blew my mind that people were out there, adults were out there. I'd had challenges with my own kids' spelling because one of my daughters is dyslexic, dyspraxic, the other one dyslexic. But at that point, I didn't know about it and I didn't know that they were. They didn't have a diagnosis then. That was the day that I went, wow, this is important. And of course, over the years, I have come to appreciate the importance of it through my 14-year career.
Wow. And you're right. I think we just clarify a little bit for listeners. I don't have a mind's eye. So just even listening to that story blows my mind that people can visualize and project that visualization. And it just shows you the strengths of neurodivergent minds that we don't know because we haven't got that understanding ourselves. We don't even tap into it, do we?
He spends life, and this guy was about 40 now. His confidence had gone, Kate, as well.
Yeah.
We were doing work on his confidence. And as a coach before then, I knew how to work on confidence, but I'd never worked with somebody who was saying, my dyslexia stops me doing this and this. I remember coming out of that session and phoning one of the directors, quite emotional, saying, oh my God, this has just happened. And a lot of my clients stay with me, Kate. But that one
really does.
I wish I knew where it was now to say thank you.
Oh, don't you? When you've had an impact on somebody, are keen to hear the story as it has developed. I know I have a memory of helping somebody in the workplace way before neurodiversity was a thing. So I'd even say it was my first job in HR. So it was in the early 1990s. And we opened up a recruitment process. And this chap wanted to apply for this job. And it was a driver's job, which is why it reminds me, actually. But his manager said, no, he can't do it. He's literally can't read. And I went, but why should that stop him doing a driver's job? Does he need to read to do it? Well, he said, well, there are maps. And I said, yeah, but surely. And I was like really pushing the disability confident agenda because we wanted to be a good employer. And so we interviewed this chap and we found out his strategy was very much that visualization that you've just said there, that he saw these maps in his mind's eye. And although he had the recruitment, he turned it down. He didn't take the job. But because of what his manager had shared, we gave him an opportunity to go and get a diagnosis. And at that time, no one had ever shown that interest. And he came back with a diagnosis with dyslexia. And I felt like I'd failed him. I felt like I'd opened up an opportunity and then he didn't get the job. But he always fed back to me that without that interview process, he would never have got that diagnosis. And getting that unlocked something for him. So it's amazing, isn't it? From those times when neither of us realised the neurodiversity coaching approach and that the shifts and changes we were going to see to now. I mean, what do you notice, Cheryl, is the difference between when you first started to now? What have you seen?
I suppose in those early days, Kate, the coaching was very much dyslexia.
Yes.
Now and again, and initially our training was very much dyslexia, dyspraxia, and then we grew into ADHD and autism. I'm talking within 6 months now. We trained really hard in those early days because there were no role models for us.
No.
There were no other companies doing this thing. It really was new to the workplace because it was new to access to work.
Can I ask you, did you feel like a pioneer at the time?
I didn't until one day. And one of the directors said to me, thank you for the way you worked with that client, because as a result of that, we've just got this big contract with a technology company called Microlink. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
And so Microlink then said, we want you to do all of our coaching. And then it was like, whoa. But at the time, we were just so focused on being the 6th best coaches we could be. I don't think we realised we were pioneers then. Maybe looking back now, I don't know, yeah, okay, maybe we were. But I'm humble, and so I don't like to talk about being pioneers, but just being that great coach. And so dyslexia through and through, autism and ADHD coming through. I have to say that when it got to about 2013, 2014, and I was then responsible for about 120 coaches, that I saw a big shift then in workplace needs assessments. So they started to come in. And in 2000, I'd left Genius Within and had a year out and joined a company called Crease Puddle right on my doorstep, thankfully. And the shift that we suddenly started to see then was many requests for workplace needs assessments and a huge shift, as I'm sure that Kate, is in ADHD and autism.
Enormous.
It was like a tsunami. So I think the shift was from dyslexia only to very much autism, ADHD. Then the shift to an awareness of wanting workplace needs assessment so the businesses could see what they could do for their employee. And then after COVID, massive ADHD and autism, an explosion in that kind of thing. The other thing as well, my little nerdy head, is that yesterday I researched dyslexia in the workplace on Google. Of course, all search engines are available.
Yeah.
But when I put in dyslexia in the workplace, it came up with 54,800,000. Is it 54 million? 548 treble O.
Oh my goodness.
So that is like 54 million, isn't it?
Yeah.
54 million opportunities for me to read about this. My deepest regret back in 2011 is when we were told, go away and see what you can find out about dyslexia in the workplace. Searched Google and we probably came up with about 20 papers. I wished that I had screenshotted that.
Yes. Wow. Absolutely. Yeah. So much I want to explore with you there. I think the key theme is one of the shifts you talk about is workplace needs assessments. Now, this hasn't come up so much on our podcast, and I know it's something that you have deep experience around. So could you just start with what is a workplace needs assessment, first of all?
Let me put a caveat around this case.
Okay.
How is it that the workplace needs assessment that we built at Crease Puddle, and some of that was built on my previous experience of doing them for many years before.
Yeah.
But the beauty of the model that we built at Crease Puddle was around an assessment that talks to the employer and the employee.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation with the manager about what are you noticing about this individual? What are the strengths that you're noticing? What are the challenges that you're noticing? What adjustments have you put in place already? What adjustments do you think you'd like to try? And what's your confidence and competence level of neurodiversity? Because that's important, the manager not knowing it. So you'd have that conversation. Then you would talk to the employee, and that would be a deep dive. It would be looking at their awareness of their strengths and their challenges. And I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to you, Kate, is that when you do a workplace needs assessment, employees find it hard to switch to talk about their strengths.
Yes, all the time.
Is on what they don't do well. But interestingly, managers can often find some good strengths.
That's fascinating.
Very rare that managers won't be able to find strengths, yeah. But I think it's because the employee is so focused on what they're not doing well. So you'll do all of that and talk about the sensory environment. And then that report is put together with some recommendations that are very personal to that individual. But having said that, just before this call, we were talking about headphones and my challenges with headphones.
Yes.
And so, of course, all of us could say, yeah, wear headphones in a noisy office. But if it's somebody like me, recommending headphones isn't going to work. So the conversation that you have makes you appreciate that individual finds headphones difficult and they've tried things. So then that report will go to the employer and the employer will look at those adjustments and then implement them. Of course, Kate, you can't insist that they implement these adjustments, but I always think you're paying all that money. Why wouldn't you then take those recommendations and implement them? But you know what, Kate? It's not just that that's important. It's a very cathartic experience. I love that word.
Oh, I love that word. As a poet.
It's great, isn't it?
I love, yes.
It's what else happens outside of the workplace needs assessment. And a couple of years ago, I was doing a workplace needs assessment for a lady, probably in the late 50s, early 60s, very recent diagnosis of autism. And that came across as a result of occupational health getting involved with her stress. And we talked and went through the whole process. And one of the things to discuss in a workplace needs assessment is how is your sleep, how's your nutrition, and how's your exercise. You need to check those things out. Even though there's not a lot the employer can do, as an individual, you need to be aware that they can affect your neurodiversity. So she said, off the record, I don't want this recording, but I have a poor relationship with food. Anyway, we discussed it and put a note in the workplace needs assessment that said something along the lines of, would like to improve their diet and nutrition, is looking at ways to do it. And we left it at that. Because it does affect, there's masses of research now around ADHD and diet and autism and diet.
Huge, yeah.
So Jen went away and sent us some articles on her home email address about autism and the relationship with food, the relationship between bulimia, anorexia and autism. And the email that she sent me back said, something along the lines, it doesn't matter what happens with the workplace needs assessment. You've just opened my eyes to a whole new area. And there's a little bit of grief there, Kate, around if I'd known this years ago, and if the doctor had made this association between me and maybe autism years ago, would I be in a different place now? So it's not just that the employer benefits from being able to put the adjustments down. There is something that happens to an individual as they go through that process. It's almost a bit of healing, Kate?
It is. They're getting listened to, aren't they, Cheryl? They're getting understood for who they are and how that affects impacts the environment that they're in. And we talked about this, I think, before, that the workplace is their environment.
Yeah.
So it's really important that the things that can help you succeed in that workplace are considered.
Yeah, I think that the realisation that the growth in workplace needs assessments has happened, and that's actually led, just as I was leaving Crease Puddle, that led them to now actually create a formal accredited course for workplace assessments. I think it's one of the few that's around. I think like you've got organisations like the British Dyslexia Association, they do what it's very dyslexia focused.
Yes.
And there is another organisation that's driven by Professor Amanda Kirby, Do It Solutions, and they used to do a workplace needs assessment training programme. But I think that for your specialist area, HR, that for organisations to be able to invest in getting their HR professionals or their occupational health teams trained in neurodiversity workplace needs assessments, I think individuals would be attended to quicker.
Yes.
And then that dip in performance wouldn't start to happen. That would be ideal.
It would be amazing if that could be a proactive. And I know the best neuro-inclusive organisations have processes around asking everybody what they need to be successful. Yeah. So it's not just a question for the neurodivergent person. When it is just a question to them, it can feel a little bit intrusive sometimes. So they're being singled out because of this hidden disability. But it's a common question to everybody. And then a sort of acceptance that everybody struggles in some way in a workplace because it's not designed for everybody. It really is more inclusive.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well, Kate, about a workplace needs assessment, and you were talking about your gentleman there earlier on, about you being very pivotal to him going and getting his diagnosis. You don't have to have a diagnosis to have a workplace needs assessment. And I can only speak for the work that we did at Crease Puddle, but for me, I've always had this ADHD, autism, dyslexia in the background here. So it became like sitting behind me. Therefore, if somebody did come and said, I think I am dyslexic, my daughter's recently been diagnosed through school, I can see, or ADHD, it's a really common one now for people to say, my child's been recently diagnosed, and I can see myself in them fully. So that's also really beneficial for the employee to be heard, even though they don't have this diagnosis.
I think what you've done there, Cheryl, is just indicate a really nice way that HR teams can respond, because quite often they feel they need to get a diagnosis to be able to give somebody that special support. It isn't. So like you've said, if somebody in HR heard that someone recently, their child has been diagnosed, that would give you a flag to say, let's just assess the environment anyway for where it could be adjusted or improved for everybody. I'm assuming that's possible through a workplace needs assessment, that it would have that impact.
It would. Those kind of things are funded by Access to Work, of course. But in my experience, and I think I talk for the other assessors as well, the last year and the year before was quite crazy doing workplace needs assessments. And they're wonderful because it's like a fact-finding mission with a bit of your coaching head on as well.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, by and large, Kate, you're almost talking 50-50 of clients coming with a diagnosis. And so now I've got this diagnosis, I need to understand more about how my employer can support me. But equally, people saying, I'm struggling with all of these things and I don't know. I've just got a feeling that it might be dyslexia or it might be ADHD. So then to go through that process and suddenly for them to be asked about the sensory overload.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Give me an idea of the kind of things that might unsettle you visually. And suddenly their own realisation that they keep going at work, even though visually there's too much going on for them. And for somebody to listen to that and go, yeah, okay, great, that's great, that's great. Let's think and adjust. And that's it. So it's not just me.
No, that's right.
No, it's a real thing, visual overwhelm.
I had a very short period in an open office environment, and all I can remember is getting the worst migraines I have had in my career. And I've had them on and off, but they were so painful. I had to go into sensory deprivation, really, which was the first aid room, totally blacked out. And I was because of the environment that I was in, amongst other things menopausal related. We've talked about this on other podcasts, that overlap of menopause and neurodivergence, it really kicks off. So yeah, the sensory environment is so key, isn't it? That it has this impact on people. It's amazing that you were able to help people identify something that is manageable. For me, I think all I would have needed was to not work there. And that soon happened.
And this is the other thing, Kate. When you think about masking, sometimes we're unconsciously masking because we just think you've just got to get the job done. I remember when my eldest daughter was very small, and I always knew that she struggled. She came through school and got great GCSE, amazing A-level, first at uni, dyslexic, dyspraxic, and it all happened. But in those early days of school, when she just couldn't figure out her brain, she would come home and saying, the classroom is too busy, Mum, the classroom is too busy, it's too busy and I can't see. And she spoke to a teacher some conversation, and the teacher said, see that piece of wall there? I promise you that I will never put anything on that piece of wall there. And so when you think that everything's too busy, you look at that piece of wall there and that's your piece of wall. And I don't mind you looking up at that piece of wall. Back then, Kate, I knew nothing about dyslexia. But when I got involved in this work and I understood the visual sensory overwhelm of a page of words, I started to really think about that teacher and unbeknownly what that teacher had done for her.
Yeah. And that isn't hard to do, is it? And that didn't cost anything. That was just an acceptance of the experience that she was having, and that agreeing something together and permission to have that space. That is such a lovely example. And I bet it made the world of difference to her, did it?
Yeah. Yeah, and at the time, honestly, when I got into this work, and nobody mentioned dyslexia at all, when I got into this work, I was thinking, I wonder. I'd always been wondering about myself, of course. On a more basic level, Kate, what people think about dyslexia in particular is words moving on the page. You can't spell and you can't read very well. But there's people out there that can spell all sorts that are dyslexic, frontwards and backwards, and they can read well. What happens is the moment they open that email, there is an instant visual overwhelm.
Yes.
So unbeknownst to them, that little amygdala at the back of the brain starts to wake up and go, oh, there's a bit of trouble here.
Yeah.
And there's that tiny bit of fight or flight mode starts to waken up in the system. And one of the easiest adjustments is just copy and paste the email onto a Word document, spread it out nicely, put it into a colour that you like, put it into a font that you like, and then now I'll read the email, and all the anxiety goes whoosh, away.
I was going to ask you about hints and tips. I love that. I am so colour conscious. So although I can't make images in my mind's eye, I've probably done things like that with emails and not realised how that's then made a difference for me. Just that pop of colour at key points. And like you say, I have a to-do list. I hate lists. I'm demand avoidant. I think I've talked about this on another podcast. So a list is basically just shouting at me to do things. And I'm going, no, I don't want to do any of you. But if I spread it out and put some colour on it and I body double having completed stuff, even if it's tough stuff, then yeah, I can get through it. But often people just say, don't they, oh yes, it's easy if you break it down and put it in a list. And it's actually the worst thing my brain can experience is that demanding because also the ADHD is I have to complete the whole list. Anything else is failure. That's hard. What other tools and techniques have you come across, Cheryl, that you can share in the workplace that would maybe help with this sensory overwhelm? Because you've got such a rich experience of that.
One of the things, though, Kate, is to appreciate, and you will know this being a coach, and we're recording this for your coach association for coaching. So one of the values that's deep-rooted in any coach is that the coachee has all the answers with it.
That's a good point. Well made.
Now, that's all well and good, Kate. If in your life you've never heard of a colour overlay, it doesn't matter how many questions your coach asks you, the answer of using a colour overlay is never going to come out of you.
That's right, yeah.
There'll be some things that will need telling, but equally, it's quite amazing the things that clients do have inside them. But again, coloured overlays, coloured rulers. I remember coaching a lovely young girl who worked for it used to be a building society and now it's a bank, but we won't mention them. And when I first met her, she had an overlay that's like a ruler. So you can get these coloured overlays like a reading ruler. And what she'd done is she cut out the name of the bank and glued it to the reading ruler so that when she was filling the forms in the bank, the customers, she just said, oh, it's just to ensure that I follow every question. And she said the customers would often want to take this reading ruler off her, but it was her way of feeling confident about using a disability aid. things like that.
Do you know, you can buy them in a local supermarket. I don't know if I should mention.
You can't buy them in a local supermarket now.
And I had never used a colour overlay. I knew about them for my clients and I thought, oh, I'm going to buy these. And I was reading a book at the time, and I struggle with reading postmenopausal, actually. I read more books before. This is how I ended up into reading poetry, actually. People don't know that story, but I struggled concentrating and thought I can at least read a whole poem.
Yeah.
So that was my route back into poetry. But because I want to read some of the books I've got now around neurodiversity, I got the coloured overlays and I tried them all, and I found that the yellow one worked for my brain really well. And yeah, I agree with you completely. If you don't know about these techniques, you're not going to automatically think of them, and which is why neurodiversity coaching is a little bit more directive and a little bit more mentoring, isn't it, sometimes?
Yes, it is. Yes. And sometimes the adjustment is within you. It's an adjustment of a belief I have about myself that will now move me forward. But you go on to ACAS. On ACAS, there is the most amazing list of reasonable adjustments. Hate that phrase, by the way. The Americans love their phrase accommodations. It's really nice. But then why should it be called anything? It's just all-inclusive practices. But things like, I have a couple of clients that have a flick chart close by them, because when they've got to do something and write an email, they will turn around, they will scribble the email on the flick chart, ideas for the email, rip it off, and then they'll type their email, because to download in a non-linear format is easier than trying to download an email and think, I need to say this first and then this second. But it's about giving yourself permission
to do it in a creative way.
Yeah, giving yourself permission to... I was quite Pretty Woman where Richard Gere was walking around the grass with nothing on his feet, and then he comes back in and he makes this decision about where he's going to take the business. Some of our best thinking is done when we just get out of the confines of the office. Now, is that a reasonable adjustment? Is that an accommodation? Or is that just you giving yourself permission?
Permission, and I think it's being human. We have created this false idea of having to do work in a particular environment, and this is probably why we're seeing a lot more people struggling and an exacerbation of some of these overwhelm conditions, because it's not a natural way to get work done or to thrive as a human, is to be under false light. And I've been in offices before with no windows and that kind of thing. They're not conducive to work in. So that getting out, moving around is really important, isn't it?
It is definitely. And since COVID, we've seen a big shift then. And we know there's lots of research now about the fact that we're all sitting for days for longer and things like that. And particularly to the ADHD brain, it loves difference. It loves variety. And just to get out in the garden and just walk around the garden, or if you live in a flat, to come down the lift and just walk up the block and back again, gives that brain what it thrives on, which is variety. However, variety actually stops you focusing on the thing you've got to focus on. You're giving it the starters before you have the main course.
Oh, I always like to eat my dessert before my main course. I get the dopamine first and then I get on with the big... There was a post on LinkedIn actually about what about the advice, eat the frog, which is do the horrible big nasty thing first. And actually I said, no, that's absolutely the wrong thing for neurodivergent brains. Do the thing that gives you the dopamine first. And that's literally, seriously, people laughed at me because I used to go and get my dinner from the van that was parked outside our road. And say dinner, it was a Mars bar and a sandwich, and I'd come over the road eating my Mars bar, and then I'd have my sandwich, and people, because I was an HR director, be going, they'll be watching your every move, and they're like, why do you eat the Mars? I'm like, well, I don't know why I eat it, because that's where my brain wants the dopamine, the sugar, and then get on with the work after.
Of course, Kate, the dopamine high could come from doing the scariest thing first. So in that case, the book, Eat the Frog, it is true, isn't it? Because if I do the scariest thing first, then that is really risky.
Only if it's risky. Sometimes the big frog for me is the boring task, and it's like I'm never going to prioritise that first.
And that's that word is about some, often, may, can. I love it with autism. When you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I think that's the thing about the joy of social media and the downside of social media at the moment is that some gorgeous stuff out there, going back to my figure, 54, 800 and then 3 more zeros there. I'd love to know how to say that number. I do not have dyscalculia, by the way. I think that sometimes there is this, all ADHDers do it like this. And
I've seen it. I've seen the advice.
Yeah.
So, I have aphantasia, possibly autism traits and ADHD. Put that all together, and what works for me will not work for somebody who is hyperphantasic and dyslexic and audio. I don't know. It's not the labels that define what you do. It's the individual needs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fascinating. So this is us talking about the workplace, the environment and the people. What role and what difference can leaders and managers make within all this?
I think a lot of it is educating themselves, whether that's trying to upskill themselves out of their own pure interest. There's enough books out there to read, some brilliant books. One of the first books that we're all given to read was The Power of Neurodiversity by Thomas Armstrong. And one of the chapters is called The Gift of Mood. And another one I think is called The Advantages of Anxiety. There's some lovely books out there. And then there's a teeny weeny one like this big by David Grant called That's the Way I Think. It's like this big. You could probably read it in your lunch break.
Those are my kind of, it's got any poetry in it?
No.
That's a shame.
We need you to write a poetry book all about I think managers can educate themselves, but a manager wouldn't go and educate himself about, dare I say, cancer. So you could actually say, why is there a need to go and educate myself about all these conditions? I'll never know autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, but it's just having awareness that they're there. I think it's also about what can I do to help you to work at your best? And to have that honest conversation. Great managers do great feedback.
Yeah, that's true.
We all know this. We know great managers do great feedback. And the great feedback goes, this is where I'm noticing you're struggling. And I'm just wondering whether there's something else going. You don't have to say the word dyslexia or ADHD.
No.
You just need to say, I'm noticing this, and we put training in, still these things are happening. I'm just wondering. There is a guy, one of my earlier clients, I was working with the BBC in Manchester. And I don't know if you've ever been into the BBC in Manchester, but their building has rooms in it that have got themed rooms. So there's a room that's like the Stig and Horrid History. So you're sitting in a room with like heads on sticks and things like that and all that. And I was with this guy, and his manager had done just that, Kate. His manager had said, look, we've had this 360 feedback on you, and you are an amazing manager. You really are. But these are the things that you're just not doing. And we tried time and time again. And she actually said, I wonder if you're dyslexic. And he said to me, he said, I let her believe it's true. He said, but afterwards, I believe I'm ADHD, but dyslexic's fine by me. And so that manager did what she thought was best for him. And what was interesting for him was having coaching sessions, was this realization that the sensory environment was the biggest thing that was stopping him from doing his job. He hadn't realized the noise of the rooms. And in that sudden click moment, and it was, Kate, it was just an absolute moment where I went, I have never realized how the noise of these rooms. So he would be in a meeting and then walk out the meeting because of overwhelm, but not knowing why. And so if his manager hadn't put him in for coaching, he would never have got that realization. And all he did then was him and his second in command went around the BBC and found all the nice quiet rooms. And that was one thing that helped him progress. But that manager, had that manager not been a great manager and done great feedback and noticed these are regular challenges here. And also because the BBC, their ethos is all around accessibility, isn't it? They know about access and disability. So as a manager, it was not a new concept to her. And we are talking good 9 years ago that I worked there with this one person. So with that accessibility head on, she noticed that something regularly was happening.
It's the pattern, isn't it? Yeah.
And strangely enough, I'm still in touch with that person now, even though he's left the BBC.
Oh.
And I have complete permission to share his story. That one, I love it.
It's nice when people are okay for you to do that, because I share a lot of my own stories and I've asked permission from people, so I can do that as well. It's important.
I do too, yeah. It's important. Even though you don't mention names, you never know who's listening to these. And if somebody suddenly hears their story being shared online without permission.
So Managers play a key role. Something that you and I have also talked about is the empathy associated with that, and how it can be really difficult if somebody has a more neurotypical way of looking at things compared to somebody on their team who is a different thinker or kind of processes things differently. We call that challenge the double empathy challenge, don't we? Have you seen that in practice?
Yeah, I think the double empathy challenge is, I tell there's a guy, an incredible guy at Sheffield Uni called Dr. Luke Bearden. If you get a chance, look up his stuff. He actually appeared on the Chris Packham programme. Packham was, inside the autistic ADHD brain. And so Luke Bearden, I first saw him speak years ago, and he just blew my mind away. He does a lot of talking about double empathy. And if you think about what it is, the theory of it is that it suggests that when people with a different experience of the world interact with another person, then they struggle to empathise with each other. So this is not unique to neurodiversity, Kate.
No.
If you just think about race, religion, even the sexes, male to female, and it does work both ways. So it's not just about that neurotypical manager struggling to understand the operating processes of the ADHD or the autistic. It's the autistic person struggling to understand, this is so logical. I don't know how you can't see it.
Yes, it works exactly like you say. What happens though, I've seen in the workplace, is that the manager will say, clearly there's a problem there, that person X, Y, and Z. And they will see it as their role to diagnose the problem. But that's not. It's a misunderstanding between both parties. Often played that translating role, kind of being a translator for people, because in HR you have to see both sides.
Yeah, you've got this whole use of metaphors, haven't you, Kate? And I know you love metaphors. You love a bit of metaphor, don't you?
I do.
For some people, metaphor just passes them by.
No.
There is a story that I've heard, and it's many years ago I heard this story. Somebody saying that they'd gone in to do co-coaching, so that's like the manager and the employee and the coach. And the manager was saying he's not a team player. And so the employee is saying, I don't know what it is that you need me to play. And he's saying the game is all about us getting together and cheering. And this manager is using metaphor after metaphor. And the employee is saying, what you want me to do is to come to work and there's a game that I need to play. But if I don't know this game and I don't know the rules to this game, then I can't play that game. So can I just ask you to tell me what it is you want me to do instead of plain English? And the coach helped facilitate this conversation. But this manager, because his own natural language was very metaphorical, the individual who was autistic, and again, I have worked with some autists that have the most incredible metaphors, equally others that are so conceptual that a metaphor would never leave their lips.
Yeah.
And so when you get that miscommunication, Kate, then that can happen between two neurotypicals.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't need to be labelled as something, does it? I always say to people in coaching that there's this gap between intention and impact. You might intend something, but the way you've communicated it has landed in a different way. And then guess what? That person also has their own intent-impact gap as well. So no wonder when you get to the middle, the impact you're both having on each other isn't meeting. This is something we haven't talked about. What's really interesting is the patience that people have got with AI. So AI's like that. It doesn't understand the first time you ask it a question, but nobody's complaining and saying AI is stupid or lazy or... They're going, oh no, you just have got your prompt wrong. Guess what, managers? You probably just need to redefine your prompts.
Yeah.
If there's a misunderstanding, maybe we can learn something about the large language models, which actually, as I understand it, have got ground up thinking. So they actually are quite literal in their way of understanding things. You have to spell things out and be really clear. The skill that people, managers and others are learning for that will hopefully help and minimise miscommunications. There's my big wish.
Yeah, that's a big wish. And when I first got into this work, I almost started to apologise for all the stuff that I'd done years earlier.
Oh.
You know, all the training courses that I'd run for leaders and for managers and team building courses that I'd run and not considered neurodiversity and processing speed, things like that. And I thought about how much money. I used to work for Abbey National years and years ago, and we would run leadership courses. And I think, wow, all that money that we spent running leadership courses and not one day. I'm going back to 1996 now, Kate, but not one day was spent on a 2, 3, 4 month program for leadership about neurodiversity.
You wouldn't imagine not bringing that into the conversation. Where I start now is the imagination spectrum, because of having the words now. But the words didn't exist back then, Cheryl. The word for being mind blind, aphantasia, was only invented in 1995.
Yeah.
And of course, that condition was known about since about the 1800s, but we didn't have the language. So I think what's happened is, if we can forgive ourselves a little bit for not bringing that in, because there weren't the terms that were understood and accepted so much as there are today.
Yeah, and I think the thing that leaders can do is to be accepting that we all process information differently. When I do run training courses, I used to have this gorgeous exercise and we say, let's test the diversity in the room, shall we? And the exercise would be, I'm going to give you one instruction, and that is to see a lemon. Of course, there's you, Kate. You're going to go, whoa. Get away with you.
The weird thing is, though, Cheryl, I'd have sat there and gone, oh, yes, I know what a lemon looks like, but I wouldn't be visualising one. So I wouldn't know.
And that's what was great, Kate, is that in the room, you would have all different processes. What kind of lemon, what happened to you? And you'd have people saying things like, oh, I just imagined myself sitting on the veranda at the weekend with a gin and tonic. And you'd have somebody else saying, oh, my mouth just went like this.
Yeah.
I couldn't go, what? So in doing that, you actually have the diversity of the room.
Exactly.
If we have that diversity about a fruit called a lemon, and I think that's it with managers. It's a tough job being a leader and a manager. Not so sure that I know for sure that I would not want to be a leader or a manager. And they've got a lot to take on board.
Yeah.
Now. They really do, yeah.
They do. They're right in the middle of everything. And the thing I always say is, when I support a manager, you're not expected to know the answer to everything. But if you know where the boundaries are of what you do and don't know, and you know what your occupational health are there for, what your HR are there for, what your health and so you've got a lot of support around you. You just need to know when to ask for help, and that's important for all of us, really.
And I think if managers are well supported by HR, Kate, it's all well and good organisations delivering lots of neurodiversity training to managers. What that does, it stirs the managers up and it gets them excited. Now, if there's no process behind that, then the manager sees the employee, wants to support the employee, and then thinks, where's the journey to get them there?
It's a partnership, isn't it? It's a partnership not just between the employee and the manager, but with HR and the manager. Yeah. Actually, it needs the three to work.
Oh, yeah.
Going back to coaching, whenever I contract for coaching outcomes, whether somebody's neurodivergent or not, I like to have the HR person in the room and the manager and the employee, and build success in from the very beginning. That's the idea.
Yeah, there's thousands of organisations out there, and there's probably some really good role models. And I think it's a learning curve for everybody, Kate, at the moment.
Still, I think it'll continue for a while.
I also think there's a little bit of settling down to do, because what I've noticed since lockdown is this absolute, I would use the word tsunami, on the internet around neurodiversity. And there's almost become a bit of a fear that this is something that sits here on its own, and it's very different and it's very difficult, and I don't know how I'm going to manage it. And it's about saying to a manager, drop it down with your mental health employees, drop it down with your employees that have depression, anxiety, LGBTQ, those employers, the employees that maybe have long-term health conditions like maybe fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. Drop it down to there. Because when somebody comes to you and says, I need you to know I've got a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and maybe a little bit of long COVID thrown in, poor person, then you don't need to know the ins and outs of those conditions.
No, not at all. I always used to say that to managers. It's just, you need to know the process for signposting. Who can help that person? That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Thinking about what you would maybe hope to see for the future, Cheryl. What are your hopes for the future?
Oh God, give me a crystal ball.
I know, yeah. You've got so much experience. Where are we in that learning curve?
I love it. And I suppose my hopes for the future was in the days when I was at Crease Puddle, was, I remember Caroline, the CEO of the company, saying, wouldn't it be great if we could actually have a training course that was accredited and we could deliver and we could train people in-house to be their own workplace needs assessors? And you might think, it's not a bit daft because that could stop you earning money. No, this is about empowering people. It's almost like that inanimate fee. When you need me, but you don't want me, I'll be here. And when you want me, but you don't actually need me. And that's what I think it's about, having managers and organisations to have access to training so they can feel more empowered rather than organisations holding all this knowledge for themselves. That wish is almost there, albeit it needs people to attend it. But I'm sure that other organisations are doing the same. I just don't know. So I think that would be the thing. And therefore, for people having a workplace needs assessment when they show the challenges of neurodiversity, it would reduce stress, it would reduce anxiety, it would increase attendance at work because people wouldn't go off as often. It would increase performance at work because people would feel valued and listened to. So the whole workplace needs assessment is something for me. And I think it's this whole thing about social media, Kate. It's very powerful. And people have seen things on social media and finally got the courage to talk about their ADHD or their autism. But do you know what I notice is that social media views, like the views about how my autism broke me or how my ADHD led to me £20,000 in debt. And I know those stories have a place. What I'd like to see on social media is people saying, do you know what? I have got ADHD, but I've got these 5 strategies and I work hard with these 5 strategies. And that means that I will have people saying to me, are you sure you're ADHD?
Yes.
And that's bigger than me because this is society and we know that bad news sells. But it would be lovely to turn on social media and see more stories like that.
I agree.
I think that would be allowing people for their strengths to shine.
Yes.
Like maybe at the moment, because the things I'm struggling with, my strengths are being hidden. But when I deal with the things that I'm struggling, my strengths will shine and I can come through and I can be the person that I've always wanted to be.
I would wish for that focus on strengths as well.
Yeah, that's one of your big passions, Jo.
I supported my daughter with a bit of career coaching. It's really hard to coach your own children, first of all. Let's just say this.
Very brave.
But was willing and I didn't force her to do it. And I also made sure that it was creative and artistic because she's an artist. So we did a bit of drawing with pastels and chalks and things.
Nice.
But when she did the strengths questionnaire, the strength scope questionnaire, the thing that really struck me was she said, Mum, why don't we learn about this when we're at school? Why don't we learn about our strengths in education? She said, why do I have to wait until I'm struggling and I don't understand what I want to do to know what I'm really good at?
Yeah.
My heart broke a little bit at that point because that's an educational systemic issue that we aren't giving our young children, our young adults, the belief that they've got strengths. We don't even help them identify them.
And then they come to the workplace, Kate, don't they? So what is this individual that's being told you can't concentrate, you can't focus, you can't sit still, you're always looking out the window. I coached a lady just recently. I said, I'm having your story. She said, you can have my story. And we call it the geography teacher story.
Okay.
She says when she was at school, her teacher let her read a geography book in the lesson. And it wasn't a geography lesson, but because she was fascinated by geography, and every time the teacher asked her a question, she knew the answer to the question of that lesson. And she said, it's that, and we call it the geography book story.
Wow.
And I said, I'm having that. What an insight that teacher had for somebody who wasn't diagnosed ADHD, but showing all the signs.
Yeah.
And for her, remembering that story has helped her to understand that rather than reading a geography book on a call, if I doodle, my doodling is my geography book. And in a moment, everything changed about that person.
Yeah.
So schools will give us the employees of tomorrow. And so maybe the hope for the future is what can be done in schools. That's bigger than me.
No, I wouldn't tackle that one. The final thing I think I'd like to say about the space of neurodiversity coaching is the powerful intervention of co-coaching and how that is probably the next step for increased understanding in the workplace. I've only done a little bit of co-coaching, but every time I've done it, the understanding that is created between the manager and the employee, I can never anticipate what they're going to discover about each other, but they do. And it becomes a foundation for continued conversation and success, or realization of what's important and what isn't. I definitely would like to see managers and not their employees coming together into a co-coaching conversation and exploring together what's possible.
Yeah, it is. And from an access to work point of view, access to work I've done, if we were to count up all the money that's been invested in neurodiversity since 2010, since the Equality Act, and if we were to see how much that was in the pounds, I'm sure it would be huge. And within that, if there was any way that a little bit more could be spent on co-coaching, rather than allocating somebody 12 hours of coaching, give them 10 hours coaching and 2 hours of co-coaching. Whether I was working for Genius Within or whether I was working at Crease Puddle, in those days, I would see clients with orders for coaching from Access to Work for anything from 8 hours to 20 hours. Well, take some of those 20 hours off, give them a bit of co-coaching.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. What people learn from having that third-party facilitated, people just feel so much safer and they share things, both of them, that they never thought they would. It is incredible. Were any final things you would like to share with our listeners, Cheryl?
It's been a gorgeous hour. I would share that anyone. I wasn't looking forward to it. I'm one of those crazy people that everyone thinks that I'm full of confidence and everything, but I'm quite a sort of a private person, and there's not many people that know my journey. I don't talk, I just do my job, and I don't talk about my journey like the other 6 coaches there. And now and again, we will stop and we'll go, wow.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it is time to stop. I know there's books that have been written by the founder, but I wish that I could go back to every client and thank them for what they've given me the privilege to coach them. That would be the greatest thing I could do at this point in my career.
Maybe some of them will be listening now and will hear you share that gratitude, and I hope they do, because I also want to thank you personally, because you were the one that brought me more into the world of neurodiversity coaching, and it's been incredible for my development, like you say, and for the ability to hopefully make a difference for my clients and the organisations I've supported as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com, where you can explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership tools, models, and the very latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.